Chad Bornholt here. Today I'm going to show you from the very get-go, for an absolute beginner who knows nothing about race quads, how to get started. There are a lot of pilots out there that are really good at flying these, but their mindset is far from beginner, and I am not that far removed from beginner. And when I say absolute beginner, I mean that less than a year ago, I had never touched a controller that looked like this. I haven't played video games since around 1987 on a Commodore 64. I did have an RC car for about 3 minutes before I destroyed it. Some of the guys who are really good at this, they assume that you know what they're talking about sometimes, and you'll hear them whenever they're talking about practicing, they say throw batteries at it, meaning practice more. But if you're not practicing correctly, then your improvement comes slowly. So what I'm going to show you with some exercises here is the way to practice perfectly and to move forward in a steady pace, because practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. What you want to do, you're going to make some mistakes. You don't worry about the mistakes, but you do not ignore the mistakes. You analyze them. You figure out what you had to have done wrong to make that happen. And you figure out what you should have done in that situation to prevent that from happening again. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go over a little bit of terminology, not a whole lot. There is a lot that you can learn. But right now I'm just going to explain just a few things that you need to know before you start doing this. One is UAV. You'll see that written a lot. That just means unmanned aerial vehicle. Drones, quads, they are unmanned aerial vehicles. The difference between a drone and a quad. You'll hear everybody refer to a drone as a drone and a quad as a drone. I still refer to the quads as a drone. These are actually quads. Drones are quads that have a brain in them where they fly themselves to a point. The quads are manual for the most part. Most of the time when people talk about drones, people who don't know this type of stuff, they mean a drone, what I call a flying camera. It's just a camera in the sky, no different than if you were holding it yourself, and really tall. They don't do anything crazy. They hover around, fly from place to place, and they're usually focused on getting good video or good still shots. Quads, when people refer to quads, they're meant for stunts. It's almost like watching a James Bond movie. There will be a person driving a stunt car and a person driving a camera car. The camera car needs to be steady so it can get a good shot of the car doing all the crazy stuff. The next thing is LOS for line of sight versus FPV for first person view. Obviously, line of sight means that you are using your eyes, watching the quad or drone in the air with your eyes. FPV means you're not looking at it with your eyes. Your eyes are looking at usually goggles, but sometimes a monitor. The next thing is modes. You'll hear there's 3 major type of modes, and for the most part, what I'm going to be talking about today for a beginner is what we call stability mode. Some people call it angle mode, and drones are stability mode. Quads, not necessarily. Stability mode means it is going to remain level and sitting perfectly still at all times, that you are not telling it to move somewhere. That is stability mode. Drones, that's what they do. Quads, there are other modes. There is horizon mode, which is a very slimly useful mode, just for a moment to learn how to do something. But horizon is not a mode that you want to be in. The other one is called acrobatic mode, and some people call it manual mode. And there are some variations on, they call it rate mode also. There are some variations on acro mode that we'll talk about later, but that's pretty much it for the terminology you need to know now. So for the purpose of this, we're going to use the cheapest introductory drone kit that we found. And the reason why is it's an all-inclusive kit. Most of the times whenever you're buying these things, you have to buy each individual piece, know how to make them talk to each other. The Fat Shark 101 drone racing training system kit comes with everything that I'm going to show you here, and although its list price is $250, I've seen it as low as $105. Yesterday, while preparing to make this video, I saw it for $160, but it comes with everything here. So it comes with what they call the Shark Quad. It comes with extra parts for the Shark Quad, a few extra props, some motor protectors, a couple of extra motors. It also comes with the radio that is already pre-bound to the quad, so you don't have to know how to do any programming. Then the radio comes with 4 AA batteries. They are not rechargeable, so you would have to provide more later. It does come with rechargeable goggles with 8 pre-programmed frequencies that are channels on the goggles, and the quad is pre-programmed with the same 8 frequencies. So you can actually scroll through and find your video easily. It has a cable for charging the rechargeable goggles. That cable also doubles to hook to the radio, so you can connect the radio to a computer, because it also comes with a simulator, so you can do all your training on the PC and do all of your wrecking and destroying of your equipment on the computer rather than in real life. It comes with 2S 260 milliamp hour batteries. 2S is kind of like there's 2 small batteries in one connected together. So you'll hear that a lot, 2S, 3S, 4S. But it comes with 2. Each one of the batteries take between 30 and 45 minutes to charge, and then they gain you about 3 to 5 minutes of flight time, depending on how aggressive you are. And then they have 1 charger. You can buy kits with 2 more batteries and 1 more charger. And when I started getting into this, I knew that I needed to do that, because 6 to 10 minutes of air time is not going to be enough. I needed more straight time in a row to get good at this. So I bought 5 of the kits. So that had me a total of 12 batteries, 6 chargers. I would charge 6 batteries at once. When they finished, I would unhook those 6 batteries, hook the other 6 batteries up, and then I'd have 12 batteries, which was approximately 1 hour of flight time. Besides that, it also has in the box these 2 race gates. They're foldable, and they have the cardboard in the box that when you pull it out, it's kind of difficult to check to see that that's what that's really for. But this is for much later, after you can already control the quad. So the 3 major parts of any setup like this, whether it's this one or any other, is there's always a radio telling the quad what to do, and then the quad sends its video to the goggles. They are completely separate, but it's interesting the way they work. So the radio, it has its signals that are sent via a frequency into the air. The quad will have an antenna picking up that frequency, but the quad's flight controller, its receiver, has to be on the correct frequency, has to be bound to that frequency. The Shark Quad comes bound to the radio, but sometimes you'll see that they are not bound. I'm going to show you how to bind them if yours comes unbound. There's a bind button on the quad, and there's a procedure for doing it. So the radio sends its signal to the air. The Shark Quad's receiver sees what it wants it to do. The flight controller tells the quad what to do, passes it to the ESC, or the electronic speed controllers, which tell each prop how fast to go. Completely separate from the radio to the quad, the video part of the quad doesn't know anything about what's going on as far as the fact that it is in the air. The camera is hooked to a video transmitter, which it too is set to send at certain frequencies. The Shark Quad is set up to send on 8 different frequencies, which they have got pre-programmed to 8 Fat Shark video channels. It sends it into the air, and the goggles have the same 8 video frequencies programmed into them as 8 Fat Shark video channels, and you can scroll by pushing the button on the channel on the quad, the channel button on the quad, and you can scroll by pushing the channel button on the goggles until both of them are on the same channel. That way, you've got your radio bound to the quad as far as commanding the quad what to do, and then you've got your goggles on the same frequency that the video is coming out. Quad dynamics. So I'm going to explain exactly how these quads function. They function very similarly to a normal helicopter. So if you're ever in a helicopter and you look up at the horizontal rotor, you'll see that the rotor spins clockwise when you're looking up at it. What that means is that the blades on the rotor have to be angled so that as they turn clockwise, they are cutting air from above the blade and pushing it down below the blade. Eventually, this amount of air that is thrusting down is equal to the weight of what it's trying to lift. As soon as it is pushing more weight than that, more air than what the weight is, the helicopter will lift. As soon as it is pushing less than that, the helicopter will fall. So these work the same way. They cut into the air at a certain angle, force air down. As soon as they overcome the weight that they are offsetting, it lifts, and as soon as they don't, they fall. However, on a regular helicopter, due to Newton's third law of motion, every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. As the propeller is turning clockwise, looking up at it, it wants to split that rotation with the fuselage of the helicopter itself. So the prop wants the helicopter itself to spin. On regular helicopters, the way they offset this is they've got a vertical tail rotor that is pushing air to the left, whereas the helicopter is trying to rotate to the left. It pushes air to the left the same speed that it would take to prevent that rotation. So when the helicopter is spinning its overhead rotor, the air pushing out of the tail rotor to the left prevents it from rotating. If they want to rotate to the left, they just slow down the tail rotor. If they want to rotate to the right, they speed up the tail rotor. There's another kind of helicopter that you see in military called a Chinook. Instead of the tail rotor being vertical, it is horizontal like the front one. But in order to keep the thing from rotating like that, they make it where the rear rotor is rotating counterclockwise. The front rotor rotates clockwise, and the fact that the rear rotor is rotating counterclockwise offsets the desire of the fuselage to rotate. So quads work off that same principle. The white rotor here, prop, is going to rotate clockwise. Remember, we're looking at it from underneath. The Chinook principle means that the rear one will be rotating the opposite direction. Now picture that is a normal Chinook, and then another Chinook is next to it but facing the opposite direction, where the two white props are rotating clockwise from the bottom, and the two black props are rotating counterclockwise from the bottom. You have to ensure when you are setting up one of these quads that the motors turn the correct direction and that the props will make the air go the right direction when they are put on the motor. If you don't have the motors go in the same direction that they're supposed to be going and the props go in the direction that they're supposed to be going, it's not going to fly, because as they all turn at the same speed, it stays level. These quads know where level is. As long as they are all going the same speed, it is going to remain level. If you wanted to turn, just like the Chinook, if the Chinook wants to turn left, it slows down two of the props or speeds up the other two, and it will turn. If you do the opposite two, it will turn the other direction. If you slow down the front two, it's going to dip the front, the back will raise. These things go the direction they are leaning. So if you lower the front, it is going to go forward. If you lower the back, it is going to go backward. Likewise, if you lower the right side, it is going to go to the right. If you lower the left, it's going to go to the left. If you lower a corner, it's going to go to the corner. There's different ways of doing this. Mostly, hopefully, it's with the radio, but you can have motor problems and you can have prop problems. There can be something stuck in the prop. This, for instance. Or the motor can be going bad, it could be getting hung up. You could have several different reasons for that to happen. All right, now we're going to talk about the radio. The radio, 2 sticks on here. I'm going to go over each stick individually, and there are 2 main mistakes that you will make with the sticks on the radio, and they're easy to understand once they're explained, but you won't understand what's going on unless they are explained. It'll take you a while anyway. So your right stick is a lot easier to learn. Your right stick controls lean. You push forward, it's going to lean forward. You push back, it's going to lean back. You push right, it's going to lean right. You push left, it's going to lean left. It is that simple. Your problem with your right stick, the mistake that you will make is when it is not facing away from you. If you keep the front of the quad facing away from you, you will not have near as many problems with the right stick. Whenever you have the quad coming back at you, and let's say it's aiming right at you, you'll think, I need to get this thing away from me. You'll push forward. Well, forward is to come at you even faster. So you can easily dodge this one, but what you would need to do is to go back. One way to think of this is whenever it's facing you, push toward the thing that you want to avoid. In the beginning, it's easier to always just keep the quad facing away from you, because the majority of the wrecks that you're going to make is whenever you're really close to something, like say here it's to its right, and I'm thinking, oh, I want to go this way to get away from it. I push that way thinking that's going to make it go that way, but that's right. Pushing that way is right. Well, that's going to make it go, and it's going to hit it, and it's going to wreck. So for this reason, I say that your right stick, you will make that mistake because of your eyes. Your eyes will have deceived your brain into which direction you need to go. As long as you stay facing away from you until you're really good at it, you won't have this happen. The left stick is quite a bit harder. The left stick, you're going to make mistakes with it, but the mistakes you're going to make on that are going to be accidental. You're going to know exactly what you want to do, and your thumb will not obey what you're wanting to do. The reason why, just like I said that the other one just controls lean, up and down on the left stick controls throttle speed, thrust. If you go up, all 4 speed up simultaneously. If you go down, all 4 fall simultaneously. With a quad that is slow as this one is, you're going to want to, when it's falling, you're going to want to catch it strong. You're going to have to make bigger moves to keep it off of the ground. But then whenever you let it fall, you're going to want to let it fall slowly. So when it's going up too high, lower your throttle a little, but when it's going too low, raise your throttle a lot. So the difficulty in the left stick is that the left and right on the left stick actually make the quad rotate by slowing down 2 of the props, like I was saying earlier. The problem that comes with the left stick is you will mean to increase your throttle and not turn any, but you will accidentally turn while you're increasing throttle or decreasing throttle. So you will mean to rise and you will accidentally rotate. I'm over exaggerating, but you'll mean to go up, but you'll go a little bit to one side or the other. Or vice versa. You will mean to only turn, but you will not stay straight in the middle. So if I'm perfectly hovering here and I want to just rotate, what I will accidentally do is I will turn, but I'll also move it a little bit and it'll either rise or fall. So for that reason, I say that this is an accidental mistake. Your right one, you make a mistake because of your eyes. Your left one, you make a mistake because of your thumb. On your left one, you knew not to do it and you accidentally did it anyway. On your right one, you thought that that is exactly what you needed to do, and you see that it actually is not. This is going to be joining the two sticks together. Basically, it's thrust vectoring. The easy way to think about this is with all of your air shooting straight down, if you're hovering perfectly, let's just say that there is a certain position, percentage-wise, of throttle that it takes for that thing to stay at a perfect altitude and not rise or fall. And let's say that you figured out what that is and somehow you are perfectly holding it there. That's not going to happen. But then you want to go forward. But when you push forward, you've already got this set perfectly where it's not rising or falling. As you push forward, it leans. Well, when it leans, you are no longer pushing. You have the same quantity of air that you were pushing earlier, but that air is no longer pushing straight down. It is pushing at an angle, and therefore it is not providing as much downward thrust as it was before. So as you go forward with a straight throttle, no change on the throttle, it will actually start to fall. The more that you push forward, the more that it leans, and the less air that is going straight down, and the more that it will fall. For this reason, when you increase, if you're hovering and you increase your forward, you will have to also increase your thrust to keep the elevation, or the altitude, I should say, to keep the altitude straight. If you don't do that, it will fall. If you do it too much, it will rise. The trick is that when you're hovering and you've got it perfect, and then you start to move somewhere, don't let it fall and don't let it rise. And that will make a new position on the throttle that you have to have it set at to keep it perfect. And then when you stop moving, that is now too much, because now you're pushing all of that air down, which is more than what it took a while ago to keep it perfectly. So you will go forward and you'll start to stay even. And then when you stop going forward, you'll straighten back up and then it'll start to rise. So you have to come back to where you originally were on that to keep from rising. The same thing is for right and left. It's the same effect. Even though you had a front, back, left, right, it doesn't really matter to this because they're all just four blades. The only thing that makes it front to you is the fact that you've got a camera on it. So throughout this entire thing, from day one, minute one, until the guys who are on the internet making a name for themselves and making millions of dollars doing this, the most difficult thing that you are going to run into forever is altitude control. The entire time that you are trying to get good at this, the main thing to worry about is not hitting something in front of you, behind you, beside you. The thing that you have to worry about the most is the ground. It is really difficult to get good at not hitting the ground and not hitting something above you, like a tree or something like that if you're flying outside. In here, it would be the ceiling. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you the entire time, altitude, 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 altitude. That's all you're going to be worried about the whole time. You're going to be doing things that are hard to do and control the altitude. But the hard part is the altitude. Actually making the thing fly around is not hard at all. Keeping it at the same altitude while flying it around, that is the tough part. Now that we've discussed what the sticks do, and the sticks are going to be the hardest part, altitude mainly, now we've got the switches. So you've got your arm switch. First of all, every time that you start, you're going to want both of them pushed away from you. So this is the bottom of the controller. This is the arm switch. When you flip this on, you are arming the quad for flight. This is the mode switch. Completely away from you, they call beginner. That is stability mode. You're going to want it in stability mode because it is the easiest to do. Then the center one, they call it intermediate, I believe, but basically that is horizon mode. And I've also noticed that on 4 of these that we have seen, horizon mode doesn't work on any of them, so don't even worry about that one. It's not a good mode to be flying in anyway. It causes bad habits. And then towards you is acro mode. It's a lot tougher. The difference between stability mode, horizon mode, and acro mode. So when you're flying these and you're in stability mode and you lean one direction or another and then you let go, it goes back to level, or at least what it believes is level. This thing has a level on it and it thinks that it's perfectly level. Now you may see some drift because it doesn't have a GPS thing on it that will hold it completely still like the $2,000 camera drones do. But for the most part, it will go back to a hover when you let go. That is what stability mode is. Some people call it self-leveling mode. But that is stability mode. It's going to hover whenever you let go. Also, stability mode, when you go completely forward, the amount that you go forward, backward, right, left, is going, the extent to which you do it is how fast it's going to lean forward and backward. But stability mode, the reason they sometimes call it angle mode is because it has a max angle programmed. So if you go all the way forward, it's going to go forward to a certain angle. I can't remember what it is, but this one's 50 or something like that, 55, I don't know. But that max angle prevents you from continuing to flip over, so you can't do a flip, do a roll, stuff like that, even if you want to. Eventually you're going to want to, because otherwise you wouldn't be flying these at all. So whenever you go forward, max angle, instability, max angle, instability, max angle, max angle. When you switch to horizon, the entire time it is in the center, it will be level, but the entire time it is not in the center, it will let you completely turn in any direction. However, most of the tricks that you try to do, part of the trick, during the middle of the trick, you need to be in the center. Well, horizon mode will make it go back to level in the middle of your trick. That's why it's a bad idea to be in horizon mode, because the thing will do some crazy stuff in the middle of your trick that you didn't understand. So going to acro mode is nothing like the other ones. When you push forward, you are telling it start to lean. When you let go, it doesn't go back to level, it just stops continuing to lean. If you want to hover again in acro mode, you have to undo the move that you did to get it back to level. So if I went to the right, I'm leaning, and it's going to continue to lean. I stop. It's like that. But the direction that these things lean, they go. So this thing's going to be going hard that direction. If I want it to start hovering again, I have to turn it back to level again. Same way in every direction. This is not really affected by stability, horizon, or acro. Only your lean stuff is. The DRL simulator. So in the box, there's a small QR card that tells you how to download the DRL simulator and to register it. But the instructions are not that good. You have to go download the Steam client, go search for the DRL simulator, install it, and then try to type that code in. 4 people that I know bought these and the codes didn't work. If that happens, take a photograph of your QR code and email it to support@fatshark.com. They'll give you another code that does work. Once you get that done, you hook the radio via the cable to your PC, go into the training part of it and go to the controller calibration. And do not leave controller calibration until you move everything on this radio and you see the same exact thing move correctly on the radio on the screen. After that, go to the training section. I believe there's like 54 videos, 54 training scenarios. Each one of them is approximately 2 minutes long. And don't do the FPV ones. I think the last 20 of them or so are just FPV. Do all the ones before that. Between January the 10th of 2019 and February 2nd of 2019, I spent approximately 16 hours on the DRL simulator before I ever broke out the real quad to try and learn it. Proper takeoff. I'm going to show you once how to do a proper takeoff, and from now on, after that, I'm just going to say proper takeoff. One of the most important parts of a proper takeoff is being ready to abort the takeoff. But the order in which you do things is important. So the smart thing to do is, if you're going to be using goggles, I'm going to show you this even though you're not going to be using them. You turn the goggles on, make sure they come on. Afterwards, you put the battery in the quad, and on the Shark quad, you hook over the front and then push into the back. Don't plug the quad in yet. Then ensure that the radio is disarmed and it's in the correct mode, which for us, we're going to have it in stability mode. Make sure the throttle is all the way down. Then turn the radio on. The radio is on with the green light. Disarmed, no throttle, correct mode. Then plug the quad in. And after you've plugged the quad in, check to ensure that you are on the correct channel on the goggles if you are using the goggles. If you are not, either change the channel on the quad to the goggle channel. It's easy to do on this, but it's not easy on the others. Normally, you're going to change the goggle channel to the quads channel. So you'll do that. And then afterwards, before you ever put the goggles on, you can have the goggles on your head, but you want to arm and ensure that all 4 props are turning before putting the goggles on and continuing on. Now, we're not going to be using this, but you still follow the same path. When you plug in the battery, be ready to unplug the battery immediately if something crazy happens. When you arm it, be ready to immediately disarm it whenever you get ready to arm it in case something crazy happens. That is a proper takeoff. A proper landing is the exact opposite. First of all, you bring it down to the ground smoothly, slowly, hovering 1 inch to 0 off the ground. With the more powerful quads, you may want to disarm before it touches the ground, but with these, it's okay. But when you come down, you throttle down to nothing, disarm, make sure it stops, then unplug. You unplug the battery first. Never ever have the quad plugged in and the radio not on and disarmed with no throttle, because you can have a runaway, and a runaway can, at the very least, you mess up the quad, possibly lose it, and at the very worst, you hit someone and hurt them. Binding. If the Shark comes unbound or it never was bound, this is how you can bind it. First of all, you're going to have the radio on, already have it on. Of course, you're going to have it like you're preparing to take off. And on the Shark quad, hold the bind button. You'll hear it click. While you hear it click, when you hear it click, hold it down and plug it in, and you'll see the red heartbeat of the quad, the Shark, flashing. Note the speed of the flash, and then hold down the button on the radio for 10 to 15 seconds, and you'll see it start blinking. And when you see it start blinking, note the change in the heartbeat of the quad. That means that they have bound. Sometimes it's really fast, sometimes it's slow. After you've done that, unplug the quad like you are doing a normal flight. Turn off the radio, which is now flashing green quickly, and start over. Now turn the radio on like you're going to do a proper takeoff. Make sure that you're in the correct mode, disarmed, no throttle. Plug the quad in, and proper takeoff. Ensure that it's bound. Now for the exercises. For each one of these exercises, we're going to start with the quad facing away from you, approximately 5 feet in front of you. If you ever mess up, land, go walk and pick it up, come back, set it down 5 feet in front of you, facing away from you. Keep the camera cap on because we're doing this line of sight. You don't need the goggles. You might as well keep the cap on the camera to protect the camera for now. The batteries that come with your kit will have a string on them. Tie them off to something heavy so it can't get away from you for now, and later on we'll take it off. Remember that part of a proper takeoff also involves being ready to disarm at any time. If you start to lose control of it, bring down the throttle and or disarm it. If you can get it low to the ground, you'll take less of a chance of messing it up, but just remember that every time we're going to keep it facing away from us. That way the forward and backward pitch will make the quad pitch like you think, and the right and left roll will make it roll like you think. If you start to yaw one direction or another, stop, bring it down, set it back where it was, and start over. That way you don't ever get discombobulated in your facing. Hover. So what we're going to do is going to try to come up to about waist level. That way if you hit the ground, it won't be as far of a fall. And you're going to try to not go forward, drifting forward, backward, drifting right, left, or yawing. While you're doing this, trying to hold your altitude right, you will accidentally yaw. So if you do that, either set it down and start over, or if you can, fix the yaw while you're in the air. Now my quad is old and worn out, so it's a little tougher to keep from drifting than yours will be. So proper takeoff. Turn the radio on. After it's, make sure that it's disarmed, no throttle, you're in stability mode. Plug in the quad and then arm. Make sure all 4 props are spinning. Come up to about waist level and try and hold without drifting. That will require, if you watch my fingers, it will require a whole lot of movements. Especially on mine, I'm having to use a lot of right thumb because mine's wore out and is trying to drift a lot. So yours should not require as many right hand movements as my right thumb movements. But if you accidentally yaw like that, left, right, either fix it or just land. This may take you several batteries to get good at, but what you want to do is get where you can hold it steady without changing a whole lot in altitude. After you can do that, first of all, I'm going to land. After you can hold it steady at that altitude, do it again, but now hold it, from now on, you're going to be holding it at your eye level. That way, it's a lot easier while you're focusing on other things to see that you have messed up your altitude when it's not at eye level. Right here at waist level, it's a little tougher, but if you're going at eye level and you're trying to turn, it'll be a whole lot easier for you to automatically notice when you have drifted above or below eye level in a turn or something like that. So if you yaw or drift in any direction more than what you're comfortable with, just land and disarm it. And as always be prepared for an emergency disarm anyway. But what you want to do is just try and keep under control. This may take, some people get it in a minute, some people get it in 30 minutes. So don't move on until you have the hover really down, because the hover is very important, and it gets harder to hover when you go into goggles, and it gets a whole lot harder to hover when you go into acro mode, and then you can imagine hovering in acro mode in goggles. Pitch and roll this time, but what we're really working on is the altitude during the pitch and roll. The pitch and the roll are easy. Maintaining the proper altitude while doing so is not easy. You will accidentally yaw while trying to fix the altitude, but what we're going to do is you're going to go forward. First, you're going to get a hover, go forward and stop. When you take off and you go from the hover to pitch forward, it's going to try to fall. So you have to increase your throttle to keep it from falling. Then when you stop, it is going to try and rise. So you have to decrease your throttle to keep it from rising. Then you come back to the center again, and you're going to experience the same problems. When you begin the pitch, it is going to fall. So you have to increase. And then whenever you straighten back up to hover, it's going to try to rise. And then after that, we're going to do the same thing with right and left roll. What you're going to do is you're going to make a capital T where you're at the top of the capital T. So first of all, I've already got everything ready to go. So we're going to bring it up to a hover, proper takeoff. So I'm hovering, and I'm going to pitch forward without falling. Notice that I have to make moves on my throttle. Now I'm coming back, and now I notice I got to make moves on my throttle again. I'm going to go forward, making moves on the throttle, coming backward, making moves on the throttle. Also, don't yaw. Stay straight. Now I'm going to roll to the right, keep my altitude under control. Roll back to the left to the center, keep my altitude under control. And now I'm going to roll to the right, keeping my altitude under control. Stop the roll, keep the altitude under control. Bring it back to the center. Notice the altitude is not really changing. That's very difficult to keep the altitude steady. So not yawing and not changing altitude is the main purpose of this. What you want to do though, instead of doing it in 3 parts like I did, since you're not having to make a video, you're going to hover, forward, stop, hover. Back to the center again, stop, hover. Roll to the right, stop, hover. Roll back to the center again, stop, hover. Roll to the left, stop, hover. Roll back to the center again, stop, hover. You're going to notice it's really difficult to keep the altitude under control, and at the very beginning you're going to see it's difficult to keep the yaw under control. While you're doing this, if you mess this up, put it back down on the ground, go walk, pick it up, put it back in the center, and start over. This should take you a while to get good at. I mean, you saw how difficult it is to do to begin with. You want to make sure that you can control the altitude, and when you get to an extreme, that you don't just shoot off somewhere. It takes a little while to get used to, but you'll get it. Squares while following the quad. What we're going to do is we're going to make a square while following it. When you pitch forward, don't fall. When you stop, don't rise. Then reposition yourself to the right of the quad, then yaw the quad to the left so you're behind it again. Then start over. You're going to do this 4 times and you'll make a square. It's extremely difficult for me to keep the radio and the quad in the video while walking, but I'm going to try it and you'll get the idea. Proper takeoff. Bring it up to a hover and follow it. And stop, get behind it while yawing, and do it again. Pitch forward, stop, don't rise. Yaw while getting behind it, and then again. I'm getting too far ahead of myself, I'm slowing down. Stop. Yaw while getting behind it, and then again. Get behind it again. And continue to do that, making squares over and over. Once you get good at that, go the other direction. Don't get where you're really good at one direction and not the other direction. You're going to notice that you're better at one direction than another. The whole time, remember, altitude is what you're worried about. Not so much exactly being straight. Altitude is the problem. And accidentally yawing when you mean to go straight is going to happen. Just think about why what happened, and try and correct that next time. This exercise is going to be the same as following in a square pattern, but this time we're going to follow it and not stop to make the turn. It is going to be much more difficult to maintain control of the yaw, altitude, and heading while walking and trying to keep the quad and the radio in the video. Even if the video is not perfect, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So I'm going to bring it up to a hover. I'm going to follow. And I'm going to start the turn while I'm still moving forward. And now I stop turning, stop yawing, moving forward again, start the yaw again. Stop the yaw, forward, start the yaw, stop the yaw, and so on and so forth. So, like I said, it's really easy to go too fast on this. You can see I was moving pretty quick myself. Getting that down where you can turn while pitching forward is imperative before you move on. Eventually what you're going to want to do is make it where you are yawing and rolling at the same time, because then you're going to be moving, you're going to make the quad lean that direction while turning. If you just do it the way I was just doing it now, it's a lot harder because you're pitching forward, turning, it doesn't really, it kind of skids. If you lean and turn like that, it'll lean the quad and rotate the quad the whole time. So anyways, get that good from both directions the same way as you did the square before moving on. This one's the hardest one of all. This is following in a figure 8 pattern. So what we're going to do here, when you first take off, we're going to go around the outside of the orange cone, which means that we're going to have to make a right turn. Then when we come back this way, we've got to make a left turn to go around the yellow cone, and then so on and so forth. So you're having to make both direction turns the whole time. Remember, altitude. Not so much getting the turns correct, but altitude. As soon as you have altitude under control, you'll have everything else under control because the altitude comes last. So everything's ready to go. Bring it up to a hover. And I'm going to follow it slowly if I can and keep it in the video. Pretty tough. And I'm turning, yawing, while I'm still moving forward slightly. Still yawing. Still yawing. Stopping yawing. Going forward. Notice it tried to come up. I had to adjust my throttle. Now I'm yawing back to the left. Still yawing to the left. Trying to stay in the video. Straight, not yawing. Yawing to the right. Yawing to the right, yawing to the right, stopping yawing. Going straight, too fast. I'm gonna start yawing to the left again. To the left, straight. Again, this will be much easier when you're not trying to keep it in frame. So there's no sense in reversing this because you're reversing constantly. The altitude, of course, gets more and more difficult with each one of these. I don't know how well I kept the radio in frame, but there are constant movements with both thumbs the entire time. And you can see I was pretty much jogging during that. So get that under control before you move on. Next, we're going to combine the yaw with the roll while doing the same exercises again. And from now on, you will always do roll and yaw together unless you're doing some kind of trick. All right, this time we're going to follow the square again, but we're going to be yaw and roll simultaneously. You're going to have to do these moves quickly since we're in a smaller spot. Maybe you're not in a smaller spot, but I'm in a pretty small spot here. So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to go forward, watch your altitude. You get to the end, yaw and roll simultaneously, and then stop. And then go forward again, over to that side, same thing. So I'm just going to do one of those, and I'm going to do the proper takeoff. Get it up. I'm going to follow slowly. And yaw, roll. Forward. And yaw, roll. Forward. And yaw, roll. I didn't yaw quite enough that time. Yaw, roll. And one more. Yaw, roll. So it's not a whole lot different, but it makes the turns much faster, easier to maintain control of it when you do it. It'll be a big difference on this whenever you step into something that is not a trainer, because the cameras on other quads, they're aimed up a little bit. And when you only yaw, it really screws up your vision inside goggles. When you yaw and roll at the same time, the camera stays like what you would think it would. You're not going to notice it on this as much as the next, but you need to get the yaw and roll together good on all of these turns. Following in an oval using yaw and roll. The same way we just added the roll to the turn on the square, we're going to add the roll to the turn on the oval. So, same basic idea. I'm going to proper takeoff, get a hover, go forward. You'll notice that I'm having to put a little bit of right roll in there because mine tries to drift to the left. It's so old. So now I'm going to smooth yaw roll for the oval. I never stopped the whole way. So I never stopped the yaw and the roll simultaneously, making the entire big 180. It was just a slight yaw and a slight roll the whole time, and it made it. The more you yaw, the more you roll, the tighter the turn's going to be, but the faster it's going to be going. There's times when you're going to want to be doing that, but there's times that you're not going to. I wanted to try to use the full width of the garage here. The garage is 40 feet wide, so I wanted to try to use the full width of the garage to do it, and you quickly get it ahead of yourself when you're trying to follow it. Eventually, you're not going to worry about that because you're not going to be following it around, but right now, while you're trying to learn this, you do not want to not be directly behind it, because that's when you make mistakes with your right confusion thumb and you wreck. This is going to be figure eights following using yaw and roll together. As I said before, do not attempt this until you've got all the other stuff down. This is going to be rather difficult. I'm going to try to keep it in frame for you. Here we go. Proper takeoff. Get it up to a hover. Going forward. Try to raise the radio without raising the quad for you. So I am yaw and roll here. I'm increasing the yaw because I wasn't yawing enough. Now I'm straight again. I'm going to slow down so I can catch up. All right, now I'm going to come this way again, and I'm going to yaw and roll. And straight again. Yaw and roll. Straight again. Yaw and roll. Straight again. Yaw and roll. Straight again. And so on and so forth. Don't bother trying to be keeping it in frame like that. Just basically what you want to do is, while you're doing it, you're going to see that you are screwing up your altitude pretty severely. But keep your yaw and roll right, and we're assuming that you already had the altitude good before this. There's no sense in reversing this just like the other one, because you're making the constant reversal while you're doing it. Make sure that you practice all of this to this point where you are good at it. And you can do this well, because the next thing is not following it. Then you'll start making the mistakes with your right thumb. When it's facing you, you'll be going the wrong direction by accident. Do not do the next exercise until you have gotten good enough at these exercises to move on. Now for the goggles. So after you've gotten really, really good, basically perfect at doing all of these exercises, following it, with altitude being the thing that you're worried about, and then you've gotten okay at not following it. I don't expect you to be really good at it, because I was trying to get perfect at it, and the guy who was teaching me said, don't go that far. Going into the goggles will make it where the reversal problem that you have with your right stick is going to be over with, but your altitude problem is going to be amplified. So get ready for goggles. What you'll do is first turn the goggles on without the quad or the radio on. That way you can see the stuff that the goggles tell you have nothing to do with the other stuff being on. So if you look in there, you'll see Fat Shark 1 to the far left, Fat Shark Channel 1, and then right next to it you'll see a frequency. What that is Fat Shark programmed 8 different frequencies as pre-programmed channels on the quad, and they took those same exact frequencies and called them certain channels on the goggles. So the goggles and the quad are already pre-programmed with the channels for the frequencies. Next to that, you will see RSSI percent. That is how strong the signal coming from the video transmitter to the goggles is. Right now, mine is showing 10 because there is no video signal coming from the quad because the quad is not plugged in. Expect that to come up when it does get plugged in. To the right of that is the battery power for the goggles themselves. You know that the battery doesn't mean that it's for the quad or the radio because neither of them is on, so that must be the battery for the goggles. Looking at the top of the goggles, there is a display control. Forward and backward adjust the brightness of the goggles. Left and right adjust the contrast of the goggles. You will definitely want to change that before you get to flying. So, in order to see if we're on the right channel, we're going to turn the radio on, make sure it's disarmed, no throttle, plug in the quad, be ready to unplug it, and now the video transmitter is putting out a frequency. That's what the blue light means. So I can check and see if I'm on the same channel, and I am. But if I wasn't, I could either change channels on the quad by scrolling through the 8 channels, or I could change channels on the goggles. Because there are 8 channels for the quads and goggles, you could actually have 8 different people with a quad going at the same time. You could actually race each other. So, like I said, with the goggles on, it is more difficult to tell what your altitude is, so you may want to have someone else. When you didn't have the goggles on, you kept the quad at eye level so you could easily tell when your altitude was wavering. With the goggles on, that help is gone, so you may want to have someone else that you can watch their eye level and try and keep control of your altitude that way. After that, basically just try and constantly think of the same things that you were thinking of without the goggles on. Now, even though you're not looking at yourself and you can't see it the same way, you're seeing what's ahead of you. Think about what you had to do to make things work with the radio while you were watching it with your eyes, because it's a different feeling, but everything, the controls are the same. Now that we have gone through FPV, you've already done line of sight, gotten pretty good at following, gotten pretty good at not following. You've gone with the goggles, and assuming you can fly pretty well with the goggles on, now what you want to do, as soon as you're pretty good at that, you want to stop flying stability mode, because if you're going to fly stability mode all the time, you might as well have a camera drone. You can't do any tricks in stability mode. So what you want to do is, away from you all the way, that's stability mode. Like I said before, horizon mode doesn't really work. Stability mode or acro mode is all the way towards you. And like I said before, with acro mode, if you lean forward, it starts leaning forward and it doesn't stop until you stop. And it's going to stay that way, and it's going to continue to run away from you. You have to lean it back to stop it. And whenever you lean it back, getting it back to perfectly hovering is a chore. It's a lot harder than anything that you've done before. So my first suggestion in acro mode or rate mode or manual mode is put it in acro, do not have the goggles on, and just try and hover it. It's going to change the way your right thumb works heavily. Try and hover it, and it's going to be all over the place. You have to make those moves. The moves are going to be small, and you have to undo each move that you made. Before, to undo it, you just went back to the center. Now you actually have to reverse what you did, because you are pushing forward and saying, okay, that's good enough, by going to the middle. Now you're going to want to undo what you did. So after you've done that, and you can hover it pretty well, then try to do just the square in acro mode. Don't get a whole lot into the not following, because acro mode is pretty tough to do and not follow and have it reversing and all that stuff. Get good at that. Get on the simulator again. Go do the training missions on the simulator that are in the FPV portion of the simulator, and tell it that you want to be in acro mode. That will save you from a whole lot of wrecks. Once you get that down, the very first real trick that you want to learn is just a roll. And the roll, if you are just idling and you didn't have to fight gravity, all four of the props are going to be going slowly. But if you roll all the way to the right, even at an idle with no throttle, that is enough without fighting gravity that it will continue to do this. The longer, if you just hold it that way, it will continue to roll to the right. Unfortunately, gravity pulls you down, so what you need to do, you can't be in the throttle to keep from falling down. You have to throttle up to stay off of the ground, get out of the throttle to start the roll. Because if you stay in the throttle while you're rolling, it's going to go that way. And then when you're upside down, it's going to drive itself into the ground. So what you do is you throw it into the air, get out of the throttle, roll it, and this is where your eyesight becomes very important. You don't stop the roll until you can see that you're level again. That's the hardest part. So you roll, and when you see that you are perfectly level again, then you stop the roll. You are going to have to undo what you did. After you do that, it's going to be falling. Then you put the throttle back where it was to keep it from falling. So basically, what you're doing is you're throwing it up into the air, and as it's falling, you're rolling it. And then when it's perfectly level again, you're catching it with the throttle again. So what you're going to do is you're going to go throw it up into the air, get out of the throttle, roll it, stop rolling, catch it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves to do a roll. You do it fast enough and you can't tell, much less anyone else, that you didn't just do the roll while under full throttle. It's just like that. So you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that quickly.
Hey guys, I'm Michael Bornholt, Chad's son. I'm going to be demonstrating how to do a roll for you guys, but keep in mind I am using an Armaton Marmot, which is much more powerful than the Fat Shark, so you might have to give it a little bit more power than you can see me doing.
So now that I've shown you how to do a roll to the right, there is absolutely no difference with doing it to the left, doing it to the front by going this way, doing it to the back by going that way. So after you've got flying it, just hovering and flying around normally in acro, not really well down, but you understand what to do. Try to do the roll and remember, and just work on one roll. Don't work on any other directions. Just do a right roll or a left roll. And when it's level, stop rolling and catch it. You're going to have to throw it way up in the air, and as it's falling, roll it. Level, catch it. It's going to take quite a bit of throttle changes. Big throttle, no throttle. Roll, no roll. Big throttle again. So after you can do one of them perfectly, keep in mind that the throttle portion of it won't change to do them the other directions. Only the direction that you do this, the right stick. The left stick stays the same because the quad is just rotating in a different direction. So whatever you did with your left stick, it's the same. The right stick is the same, but in a different direction. You could even go into a corner and make it roll this way if you wanted to. But that is it, and good luck.